Good morning. Have any of you ever wondered why God created everything as God did and does everything as God seems to do? I mean, sometimes it's difficult to understand why things like earthquakes and hurricanes and other natural disasters occur. Why is there sickness and hardship in the world? And why, for heaven's sakes, did God create mosquitoes? Job cried out in his sadness and anger to God. He wanted to know why everything had happened to him. He didn't stop believing in God, but he was angry and confused, and he criticized God. Job was no different than most of us. Many times we think that we could handle things better than the way God seems to be handling them. But God never left Job, and God did not ignore Job's questions and criticisms. God said to Job, "Shall a fault finder contend with the Almighty? Anyone who argues with God must respond." Then God asked Job to think about all that God is and has done. He asked him to consider the power of God evident in nature and creation. He shows Job that God is so much more than human beings and that we are truly unable to be God. And Job understands and admits that he said things that he really didn't know anything about. When we are upset or hurting or angry with how things are happening around us, our focus is very small. We think about and feel things that touch us and those around us. We are unable to see the big picture that God sees. But God has made and sees all of creation. God is so big that we cannot imagine all that God is. God teaches Job humility, and Job knows that he is not and cannot be God. But this all-powerful, all-knowing, all-seeing God still cares for Job and still makes time to talk with him and be with Job. Job still matters to God, no matter how big and powerful God is. When we struggle to understand why things happen as they do, when we question or are angry with God, we need to think about who God truly is. And we need to acknowledge that we will never be able to be God or do things better than God. We also need to remember that no matter how big God is, God still cares for us, never leaves us, and always listens and responds to our questions and cries. Let's pray. Loving God, help us, Lord, when we do not understand, when we're angry with what is happening to us or those we love, when we are hurting, that you are all-knowing, all-powerful, and see a much bigger picture than we could ever see. Help us to see your power and glory and trust in your presence. Help us to remember that no matter how large all of creation is, we still matter to you. You are patient with our anger and lack of understanding. Help us to see and hear you when you respond to our cries and be comforted by your presence, which never leaves us. Thank you for your patience and constant love. Amen. Happy Sunday, everyone.